Hi, I'm Anna, a 30-year-old new mom, and my husband Josh and I just had our first baby 6 months ago. I thought having a baby would be the start of a new chapter in our lives. What I didn't expect was how much it would complicate my already strained relationship with my mom. My mom and I have always had a tough relationship. Growing up, she was always the type to control every little thing, and we'd argue about it constantly. But now, with a baby in the mix, things have gone from bad to worse. When I first told my mom I was pregnant, she seemed genuinely excited. I thought maybe this would be a fresh start for us. But right away, she started acting like she knew everything about being a parent, never mind that she hadn't had a baby in 30 years. She began showing up at our house unannounced, dropping off bags of baby clothes and toys that I never asked for. At first, I tried to appreciate her excitement, but then she started giving me endless advice, often contradicting what Josh and I had planned. I remember one time she dropped by with a huge box of diapers, one of those bulk packs that would last months. She hadn't even asked what kind we preferred, and I knew she wasn't doing it to be thoughtful. It was like she wanted to prove she knew better. I told her, politely, that we were trying a different brand, but she just rolled her eyes and left the box by the door, saying, "You'll thank me later." Things really escalated when it came time for my delivery. I wanted Josh with me in the delivery room, and we decided that no one else would be there for the birth. It was such a personal moment, and I just wanted to focus on bringing our baby into the world without any extra stress. I thought I'd made that clear to my mom, but she had other ideas. On the day I went into labor, she showed up at the hospital, demanding to be led into the delivery room. She argued with the nurses, insisting that as my mother, she had a right to be there. I could hear her voice through the door, and it only made the whole experience more stressful. Josh had to leave my side briefly to ask her to go home, but she refused, saying she had every right to support her daughter. It wasn't until security got involved that she finally left, but by then, the damage was done. I spent those last moments before meeting my baby feeling anxious and embarrassed. After the delivery, I decided I needed to set some serious boundaries with my mom. I told her I needed time to adjust to being a mom, and that I would reach out when we were ready for visitors. She wasn't happy, but she reluctantly agreed. At least, that's what I thought. When my mom finally came over to meet the baby, I hoped she'd be more respectful of the boundaries I set. But instead, she walked into the nursery, glanced around, and immediately started criticizing everything. "You should have put the crib on the other side of the room. It's too close to the window," she said, her voice dripping with disapproval. Then she questioned our choice of baby formula, even though Josh and I had spent weeks researching the best option for our baby. It was like nothing we did was ever good enough for her. As the weeks went on, she kept pushing the idea that she should be the one to babysit. She would say things like, "You and Josh deserve a break. I'm happy to take care of the baby anytime you need." I knew it was more about being in control than actually wanting to help. I'd seen this side of her too many times growing up. I remembered how she would leave my brother and me home alone when we were way too young, even though she always brushed it off like it was no big deal. The idea of her looking after my baby just made me nervous. Josh and I had a long talk about it, and we both agreed that having my mom babysit wasn't an option, at least not for now. We wanted to make sure that our baby's safety and routine came first. Josh was supportive, but he could tell how much this was weighing on me. I felt like I was stuck between wanting to protect my baby and not wanting to hurt my mom's feelings. It all came to a head one evening when my mom asked, directly and bluntly, if she could babysit for a few hours so Josh and I could have a night off. We were having dinner at our house, and I could tell she was waiting for the right moment to bring it up. When I told her, as politely as I could, that we weren't ready for anyone else to babysit yet, she looked stunned. Then her expression turned into one of pure frustration. She launched into a whole speech about how I was keeping her from her grandchild, how she just wanted to help, and how ungrateful I was for all the things she'd done for me. It was exhausting. I tried to stay calm, explaining that we appreciated her offer but that we had our reasons for not needing a babysitter yet, but she wouldn't listen. She got up, grabbed her purse, and stormed out of the house, saying that I'd always been dramatic and that she couldn't believe I was treating her this way. A few days later, I got a call from my aunt, who seemed to have been briefed on the whole situation by my mom. She told me that my mom was heartbroken and felt like I was shutting her out. She suggested that maybe I should just let her babysit for a few hours to keep the peace. It was clear that my mom had been talking to other family members about it, and I was starting to feel like I was being painted as the bad guy. I explained my side to my aunt, but she didn't seem to get it. She kept saying things like, "You know how your mom is. She just wants to feel needed." It was like she was trying to guilt me into changing my mind. That's when I realized that my mom wasn't going to stop pushing until I stood firm, no matter how much pressure I got from the rest of the family. Feeling frustrated and unsure of what to do, I turned to Reddit for advice. I needed to know if I was being too harsh or if other people had been through something similar. Update 1. So, things didn't slow down after my initial post about my mom. If anything, they got worse. Just a few days after our tense dinner conversation and the guilt-trippy calls from my aunt, my mom decided to show up unannounced at our house again. It was around 10 a.m., and I was in the middle of trying to get the baby down for a nap when the doorbell rang. I peeked through the window and saw her standing on the porch with a big bag of groceries. I opened the door, and before I could say anything, she walked right in, saying she had brought us some things to help out. She started unloading the groceries onto our kitchen counter, diapers, formula, some pre-made meals, talking nonstop about how she just wanted to make things easier for me. I stood there, trying to keep my voice steady, reminding her that we had asked her to call before visiting. She waved me off, saying she was just trying to be helpful, but I wasn't backing down this time. I told her that while we appreciated the thought, it wasn't okay for her to keep dropping by without checking in. She paused for a moment, then her face went tight. She grabbed her bag and left in a huff, calling me ungrateful as she walked out the door. I could hear her muttering under her breath as she went down the driveway, but I just locked the door behind her. When Josh came home and I told him what happened, he was visibly frustrated. He said we needed to take a firmer stance, either she respects our boundaries, or there will be consequences. The next day, my mom called me, and I knew it was going to be another exhausting conversation. She started crying as soon as I picked up, talking about how she felt like she was being pushed out of our lives and how I was keeping her grandchild from her. She went on and on about how much she wanted to be involved and how she couldn't believe I'd treat her like this. I tried to keep my cool, explaining again that we needed space and that she couldn't just ignore our requests, but she kept talking over me, insisting that I was being unreasonable. Then, she dropped a comment that hit me harder than she probably realized. "You turned out fine, even when I had to leave you alone. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal about babysitting." I felt my chest tighten. It brought back memories of when she'd leave my brother and me home alone for hours when we were kids, something I never thought she'd bring up like it was no big deal. I ended the call as quickly as I could before the conversation got any worse. After that, Josh and I talked seriously about what we'd do for childcare in the future. He suggested that maybe we should look into a more thorough background check for potential babysitters, just to have all our options open. We researched agencies and talked to a few professional sitters, which was a whole different experience compared to how I grew up. It made me realize just how important it was to find someone we could trust, even if it wasn't going to be my mom. But my mom didn't let up. Over the next few weeks, she kept sending me articles and parenting tips, dropping little hints about how she thought we should be doing things. It was always framed like she was trying to help, but it felt more like she was just trying to prove she knew better. Every day there was another text about some new study she'd read or a suggestion about our baby's sleep schedule. I stopped responding after a while, but it only seemed to make her more determined. I found out through my cousin that my mom was going around telling the rest of the family that I was keeping the baby away from her, and that I was exaggerating my concerns. My cousin called to warn me that there was a lot of talk going on behind my back, and some family members thought I was overreacting. Then my grandmother called, asking why I was being so hard on my mom. She said that my mom just wanted to help, and I needed to show a little more kindness. It was clear my mom had been rallying everyone to her side, and I felt like I was being cornered from all angles. And as if that wasn't enough, my mom showed up uninvited again, just a week after the last time. This time she brought even more baby supplies, onesies, toys, things we hadn't asked for and definitely didn't need. She insisted they were necessary, and when I tried to turn her away at the door, she wouldn't take no for an answer. We had another awkward standoff on the porch before she finally left, but I could tell she was even more upset this time. My anxiety spiked every time I thought about her showing up again. I started pulling back emotionally, feeling like I was constantly on edge. I reached out to a few of my friends who had gone through similar situations with pushy relatives, and they all told me the same thing. I needed to stand my ground. It helped to hear their stories, to know I wasn't alone in this, but it didn't make things any easier. Then my mom took things a step further by reaching out directly to Josh. She called him one evening while he was at work, trying to convince him that I was being too harsh and that he should let her babysit. She played the victim, saying she just wanted to be involved, but Josh wasn't having it. He told me about the conversation that night, and we both agreed it was time to take more serious action. That's when we decided to start couples therapy. We needed help navigating the stress this was putting on our relationship, and we wanted to make sure we were on the same page about our boundaries. Our therapist encouraged us to keep communicating openly and to stay firm about what we needed for our family's well-being. I updated Reddit about everything that had happened since my first post, the continued pressure from my mom, the way she was turning family against me, and how Josh and I were trying to stay strong through it all. The comments flooded in, offering advice and sharing similar stories, reminding me that I wasn't the only one struggling with a pushy parent. But even with the support, I knew things were far from over. My mom wasn't backing down, and I had a sinking feeling that the next chapter of this drama was going to be even harder to deal with. Update 2. After everything that had happened, I thought my mom might start to back off. But then she did something I never saw coming. She posted photos of our baby on her Facebook without asking. She took the pictures during one of her visits, ones where I was already uncomfortable with how pushy she'd been, and now they were online for all her friends and extended family to see. She even included a picture of her holding the baby, captioned with, "Missing my sweet grandbaby so much. Wish I could spend more time with her." It was clear she was playing the victim card for her social circle, making it look like I was the bad guy keeping her away. I was furious when I saw the post. We'd been very clear with her from the start, no social media photos of our baby. Josh and I wanted to keep our child's presence online as minimal as possible. I immediately reached out, telling her to take the photos down, emphasizing that we had told her not to share any pictures. But instead of apologizing, she doubled down. She brushed off my concerns, saying, "No one's going to kidnap a baby from a photo. But you're being paranoid and controlling." She acted like I was overreacting, like my boundaries didn't matter. When I insisted again, she refused to listen, turning it into a lecture about how she just wanted to share her joy and how I was making her feel like a stranger in her own family. That was the last straw. I blocked her on all my social media accounts. I couldn't deal with the constant pressure, the disregard for our rules, or the way she kept trying to manipulate the narrative. But of course, that decision caused another family-wide meltdown. My mom started calling other relatives, telling them that I was cutting her off and refusing to let her see her grandchild. She made it sound like I had exiled her without reason, leaving out all the times she had ignored our boundaries. Within a day, my phone was blowing up with calls and texts from my aunt and uncle. They insisted that my mom didn't mean any harm with the photos, that she just wanted to feel included, and that I was being too harsh. My uncle even accused me of being cruel to my own mother, asking if I really thought blocking her was the right thing to do. It felt like I was being ganged up on by my own family. They didn't understand, or maybe didn't want to understand, how much stress her constant intrusions were causing us. And then, as if all of that wasn't enough, my mom showed up at our house again. This time she came with a teary-eyed apology, claiming she just wanted to smooth things over. She stood on our porch, clutching her purse, looking like she was ready to break down. I didn't want to let her in, but she kept saying that she just needed to talk. Josh took the lead this time, stepping out onto the porch to talk to her. He told her firmly that if she couldn't respect our boundaries, she wouldn't be welcome here anymore. It was the first time he'd spoken so directly to her, and I could see that she was taken aback by his tone. She started crying, saying that she just wanted to be involved, that she couldn't believe her own daughter would treat her this way, and that she felt like she was losing her family. She kept going, saying that we didn't love her, and that she didn't understand why we were pushing her away. It was heartbreaking to watch, but it also made me angry. She still didn't seem to understand why we had set these boundaries in the first place. It was like she thought if she cried enough, we'd just give in. But Josh held firm, and eventually she left, still sniffling and muttering under her breath as she walked to her car. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, my mom dropped another bombshell. A few days later, she called and mentioned, almost casually, that she'd been reading up on grandparents' rights. She hinted that if we wouldn't let her be involved, she might have to explore her legal options. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd heard of grandparents' rights before, but I never thought my own mother would try to use that against us. That comment made both Josh and me feel like we needed to take things more seriously. We contacted a lawyer the next day, wanting to understand what our options were and whether she could actually follow through on her threat. The lawyer reassured us that she didn't have much of a case since we'd never denied her visitation outright, but he also advised us to start keeping a record of every incident, every unannounced visit, every pushy text, and now, every mention of legal action. It was scary to think that it had come to this, but we wanted to be prepared. The whole situation took a huge toll on us. I was already dealing with postpartum recovery, and the stress was making it so much harder. Josh and I found ourselves arguing more often, snapping at each other over small things, both of us struggling with the constant anxiety. I barely slept, feeling like I had to keep an eye out, worried that she might show up again or try something else. I turned to Reddit again, updating everyone on the latest developments. I poured out the whole mess, how she had ignored our wishes, posted the photos, threatened us with grandparents' rights, and how it was affecting our relationship. The comments flooded in with advice and support. People urged me to stay strong, to focus on protecting my baby, and to not let her manipulate us into giving in. It was reassuring to know that others understood what we were going through, but it still felt like we were stuck in an impossible situation. Josh and I started seriously discussing whether going no contact with my mom might be our only option if things didn't change. We didn't want to cut her out of our lives, but we also couldn't keep living with the constant pressure and drama. It was clear that she wasn't going to respect our boundaries voluntarily, and we had to think about what was best for our child. I ended my Reddit update on a cliffhanger, sharing my fear of what my mom might do next. I didn't know if she was bluffing about pursuing grandparents' rights or if she really planned to go through with it. Part of me wondered if we should give her one last chance to prove that she could change, but the other part of me didn't want to risk letting her push us around anymore. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure of whether to take a step forward or back away. Update 3. Just when I thought things were settling down, my mom found a new way to insert herself into our lives. One morning, I checked the mailbox and found a handwritten letter from her. It was a long, rambling note, starting with an apology but quickly shifting into her usual line, how she just wanted to be a part of her grandchild's life. She ended it by asking me to reconsider, saying that as a grandmother, she had the right to be involved. I read the letter twice, trying to find a sincere apology in there, but all I saw were attempts to guilt-trip me. Josh and I talked about it and decided to consult our lawyer again. The lawyer told us to document everything, every letter, every unwanted visit, every message. If she tried to pursue legal action for grandparents' rights, we needed to have a solid record of her ignoring our boundaries. So I sent her a message. I laid out everything, saying that if she kept pushing, we would have no choice but to go no contact. I told her that the constant pressure was taking a toll on our family, and we needed space. It wasn't an easy message to send, but I knew it had to be done. A few hours later, she responded with a text that went on, alternating between apologizing and accusing me of treating her unfairly. She couldn't believe I would threaten her like this, talking about how she was just trying to help, and how no mother should have to deal with such cruelty from her own child. It was a lot of the same stuff I'd heard before, but this time, it felt like she was trying to make me feel guilty for setting any boundaries at all. A week later, Josh and I decided to take our baby to a local park. It was one of those rare sunny days, and we thought it would be nice to get out of the house and take a break from all the drama. But as soon as we got there, I spotted my mom sitting on a bench near the playground. It felt too coincidental, like she knew we'd be there. She tried to approach us, waving like she was just there to say hi. Josh stepped in immediately, telling her she needed to leave. He kept his voice calm but firm, making it clear that we weren't looking to have a conversation. My mom's face fell and she tried to argue, but he didn't budge. Eventually, she turned and walked away, looking back a few times like she expected us to change our minds. After she left, I felt the panic hit me. My chest tightened and my hands started shaking. I hadn't realized just how much I'd been on edge until that moment. Josh had to help me back to the car, and we sat there for a long time while I tried to calm down. It felt like she was stalking us, like she wouldn't let us have even a moment of peace. During our next therapy session, I broke down for the first time. I told our therapist about the park incident, about the constant pressure, and about how I felt like my mom would never respect our wishes. Our therapist listened carefully and reminded us that our primary responsibility was to our baby, and that setting boundaries wasn't just for our own peace, but for our child's well-being too. She suggested that we might need to consider stronger actions if the unannounced appearances continued. That evening, Josh and I discussed filing for a temporary restraining order. The idea felt extreme, and neither of us wanted to escalate things further. But after everything that had happened, we were starting to feel like it might be the only way to make her back off. We decided to hold off for the moment, but kept the option on the table. A few days later, I found out my mom had reached out to Josh's parents. She called them, hoping to convince them that I was being too harsh and that I was keeping her from her grandchild without any reason. Josh's parents politely listened but firmly told her that they supported our decision. They let us know about the call afterward, sounding just as disturbed as we were that she would go that far. That conversation weighed on me. I knew logically that I wasn't doing anything wrong by protecting my family, but it was hard not to feel like I was splitting people apart. I started questioning myself, wondering if there was some way I could have avoided all this mess. But Josh and my friends kept reminding me that it wasn't my fault, that I was only reacting to her actions. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my mom showed up at Josh's workplace. She came into his office building, asking to speak with him about the way I was treating her. Josh refused to meet with her and asked security to escort her out. When he told me about it that night, I could see how exhausted he was. He tried to protect me from the stress, but now she was crossing lines that affected him directly too. That was the breaking point for me. I couldn't believe she would show up at his work, dragging her issues into his professional life. It felt like she was willing to do anything to force contact, even if it meant harassing us. I started documenting everything. Every call, every unannounced appearance, every attempt she made to involve the rest of the family. As word of the situation spread through our extended family, people began taking sides. Some relatives thought I was being too harsh, saying that she was just a grandmother who wanted to be involved. Others stayed quiet but gave me sympathetic looks at family gatherings, as if they knew what we were going through but didn't want to get involved. It was clear that my mom's actions were causing a rift between people, but there wasn't much I could do to control it. I shared everything on Reddit again, detailing the latest escalation with the park incident, the call to Josh's parents, and the visit to his workplace. I ended my post with a question that had been weighing on my mind: should we go ahead with legal action, or should we give her one last chance to prove she could change? I knew there was a risk in either choice, and I wasn't sure if I could handle the fallout from whatever came next. As the responses poured in, it became clear that many people thought a restraining order might be the only way to protect ourselves from further escalation. But I still felt conflicted, standing at a crossroads and unsure which path to take. Update 4. After weeks of back and forth and more unwanted contact, Josh and I finally made the difficult decision to file for a temporary restraining order against my mom. It wasn't something we took lightly, but after the incident at the park, the letter in our mailbox, and her turning up at Josh's workplace, it felt like we didn't have a choice. We needed to protect our peace and keep our baby safe. The process of serving the restraining order was nerve-wracking. Josh handled most of the legal details, but when it came time for my mom to be served, I couldn't help but feel anxious. When she received the paperwork, she was shocked. She called it a betrayal, claiming that I was destroying the family. Her reaction was everything we expected and more: angry, tearful, and accusing. She started reaching out to other relatives, painting herself as the victim of my supposed harshness. Not long after, I got a call from my brother. He accused me of overreacting, saying I was ruining mom's life by dragging the courts into our family issues. He insisted that I'd taken things too far, siding with her and dismissing everything she had done that led up to this point. He didn't understand the pressure we'd been under, or how much she had crossed the line. The conversation was short, and it only left me feeling more isolated from my own family. With the restraining order in place, I thought things would calm down, but the stress of it all started affecting me in ways I hadn't expected. I couldn't sleep well at night, worried that she might show up unannounced again or try something else to get around the order. I jumped at every unexpected sound outside, constantly checking to make sure all the doors were locked. Josh noticed how much the stress was weighing on me. He took charge, insisting we install extra security cameras around the house to make me feel safer. He even suggested that I take a break from social media altogether to avoid seeing any more posts from family members who might try to defend her actions. I deactivated my accounts, hoping it would give me some peace, but the anxiety still lingered. Despite the restraining order, my mom found a way to push back again. She sent a letter through my aunt, one of those mediators who thought she could fix everything with a few kind words. The letter was more of the same, apologies mixed with guilt trips. She pleaded for another chance to be involved in our lives, but she also blamed me for the rift between us, saying that I'd overreacted by taking things to the legal level. It felt like she just couldn't see how much she'd hurt us. We reported the letter to the police since it violated the restraining order, but because it was a first offense and she hadn't shown up in person, all she got was a warning. The officer I spoke to suggested that we keep a record of any further attempts she made to contact us. It wasn't the resolution we'd hoped for, but at least it was on record. After that, I made the difficult decision to go completely no contact, not just with her, but with any relatives who kept pushing me to reconcile. I stopped answering calls and texts from family members who wouldn't respect our decision. It hurt, but I knew that if I kept letting them pressure me, it would never end. During a family gathering that I chose not to attend, my mom had a very public meltdown. I heard about it from a cousin who called me afterward. My mom broke down in front of everyone, crying about how I had cut her off and how I was being unfairly cruel to her. She made it sound like she was being shut out without reason, and from what I heard, some relatives sympathized with her. Others tried to stay out of it, but the division was clear. The whole thing felt like yet another attempt to turn the family against me. After the gathering, rumors started spreading among the extended family. I heard that my mom was telling people that I was mentally unstable and that Josh was controlling me, keeping me isolated from my own family. It was infuriating to know she was spreading lies about me, but I tried to focus on what really mattered, keeping my baby safe and maintaining our boundaries. Then I found out that my mom had made a post on Facebook, one of those vague, passive-aggressive updates meant to draw sympathy. She didn't mention me by name but wrote about how she was being kept from her grandchild, and how all she wanted was to share love with her family. It was infuriating to read, knowing how much she was twisting the truth to make herself look like the victim. I couldn't respond to it directly, but it added fuel to the fire among our relatives. Amidst all the chaos, Josh's parents stepped in to offer their support. They told us that if we needed help covering any legal costs or if things escalated further, they were there for us. It was a relief to have their backing when so many others seemed determined to push us into forgiving my mom. They reassured me that we were doing the right thing by standing our ground and prioritizing our baby's safety. Despite their support, the guilt still lingered. I couldn't help but wonder if there was something I could have done differently. I kept questioning myself, replaying every decision I'd made since my mom first overstepped. But Josh was always there to remind me that we weren't the ones who had crossed the line. She was. He kept saying that we were doing what any parent would do to protect their child, and that we had to stay strong. Josh and I continued to document everything, from the letter violation to the Facebook post, preparing ourselves in case we needed to take further legal action. It felt like we were always waiting for the next shoe to drop, but at least we were ready for it. I shared all of this on Reddit, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. I ended my update by admitting that, deep down, I still had a small hope that this whole ordeal would make my mom realize that we were serious about our boundaries. But I wasn't naive. I knew that a real resolution was unlikely. For now, I just wanted to keep our lives as peaceful as possible, even if it meant cutting ties with people I'd once been close to. Update 5. After everything that happened with the restraining order, my mom went completely silent. For a few weeks, there were no texts, no calls, no letters showing up at our door. It felt like a weight had been lifted, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was just the calm before the storm. I kept waiting for her to make another move, but nothing came. Then out of nowhere, we got a letter in the mail, but this one wasn't from my mom. It was from a professional mediator, someone she had apparently hired. The letter suggested a family mediation session to try and resolve our issues outside of court. It caught me off guard. I hadn't expected my mom to take such a formal step after everything that had happened. Josh and I talked it over for a while. Neither of us was thrilled about the idea, but we figured it might be worth at least one session, if only to get some closure. We made it clear to the mediator that the meeting needed to be supervised, legally documented, and that we weren't making any promises beyond that first session. On the day of the mediation, my mom showed up looking more subdued than I'd ever seen her. She was quieter, less defensive than I'd expected. As we sat down in the neutral office space, she started to cry, saying that she realized she had overstepped. She admitted that showing up unannounced, pushing for babysitting, and even the social media posts had all been too much. But she also insisted that I had been too harsh in cutting her off, saying she never imagined things would end up this way. The mediator listened carefully, then turned to my mom. She pointed out that while it was clear my mom loved her grandchild, her actions had caused a lot of harm and crossed serious boundaries. She emphasized that love wasn't an excuse for ignoring our rules, and that my mom needed to understand there were real consequences to her behavior. It was strange hearing someone else put into words what I had been trying to explain for months. When it was my turn to speak, I felt something snap inside me. I finally let out all the frustration and hurt that I had kept bottled up. I told her how exhausting it had been to constantly have to defend my choices as a mother, how draining it was to feel like I was always being watched, judged, and manipulated. I told her that what hurt the most was that she couldn't just respect my wishes, even when I made them as clear as possible. For a moment, the room was quiet. My mom looked genuinely taken aback, like she hadn't realized just how deeply everything had affected me. She offered a real apology this time, saying she regretted the scene at the hospital when I was in labor and how she kept pushing to be involved without thinking about what I needed. But she still struggled to understand why we wouldn't let her babysit. She kept circling back to that point, saying that she didn't mean to make us feel unsafe. With the mediator's help, we managed to set some ground rules for any future contact. No more unannounced visits, no more social media posts about our baby, and no conversations about babysitting unless I brought it up first. And we made it clear that if she broke any of these conditions, we would go no contact permanently. She agreed, though I could see the reluctance in her eyes. Even with the apology and the new rules in place, I knew I wasn't ready to forgive or forget everything that had happened. There was too much hurt, too many sleepless nights, too many moments of feeling cornered. I made it clear that any further violations would mean cutting all ties for good. I couldn't afford to go through another round of this drama, and I needed her to understand that. Over the next few months, I was surprised to see that my mom actually started respecting the boundaries we'd set. She would text before visiting, and when we did allow her to come over, she kept the conversations light, never bringing up babysitting or complaining about our decisions. There were no more social media posts about us, and she even started keeping her distance from the family drama she'd once stirred up. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I also found out through a cousin that my mom had started seeing a therapist on her own. It was a small thing, but it gave me a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she was willing to work on herself and try to understand where we were coming from. It didn't change everything overnight, but it made me think that there might be a way forward, even if it was a slow one. The reactions from the rest of the family were mixed. Some were relieved that we were talking again, thinking that the worst was behind us. Others still blamed me for the initial fallout, acting like I was the one who'd escalated things by involving the courts. I ignored the gossip as best as I could, but it was hard not to feel the tension whenever family gatherings came up. Josh and I continued to prioritize our little family, focusing on our baby's milestones and enjoying the peace we had fought so hard for. Even though my mom was making an effort, the trust wasn't fully there yet. I couldn't bring myself to leave her alone with the baby, and I wasn't sure when or if that would ever change. She still had a lot to prove before I'd consider anything like that. For now, we kept her visits short and supervised, and she seemed to accept that, even if it wasn't what she'd hoped for. I posted a final update on Reddit, sharing that while there was a fragile truce between my mom and me, I knew it wouldn't take much to tip the balance. I explained that I'd always have to be vigilant about her respecting our boundaries, and that I was okay with that. It was better than living in constant conflict. I ended the post by saying that I had finally accepted that my mom might never fully understand my perspective, and that was okay. What mattered most was that I had stood up for my child's safety and my own peace of mind. Maybe our relationship would improve over time, or maybe it wouldn't, but at least I knew I had done everything I could to protect my family. And for now, that was enough.